Welcome everyone. We're so thrilled to have you. We're going to have a great group today of audience members and contributors, and how excited we are to have these three exciting physicians, leaders in women's health, and innovators across the medical landscape. So we're just really thrilled to be presenting this panel to you today. I'm Trish Costello, for those that I've not met. I'm the founder and CEO of Portfolia. Portfolia was the first venture capital fund to launch a venture capital fund in women's health. And that was just 2 years ago in 2018 that Portfolia Femtech, again, the first venture fund in women's health, actually was able to launch. And we've invested in over 22 companies. So it's such an exciting time. And as that video reminds us, it's never been more important for us to put our voices and our energy and our commitment behind women's health. These three physicians with us today have sterling backgrounds, exciting stories. I've had an opportunity to meet them all and an opportunity to work with Jane. And we're really going to be able to listen to them, look deeply into women's health, where it's working, where there's opportunity for new innovation and change, and where we together can invest to create a better world for women, to both enhance our health, that of our daughters and our mothers and our friends. So it's time. I don't want to take up any more with comments. Jane, I'm so thrilled that you've brought together this yourself and this great group with us today.
It is so exciting to be here. I love these two women so much. Dr. Sabri Hala, I have known since 2014. I'll let her introduce herself, but I just want to say I met her when the group she founded, Physician Mom Group, was, I think, around 1,400. I'll let her tell you how big it is today. But she has had such a profound effect on my life. And I'll say, I think this will be a theme throughout the discussion, but the way that I have connected with Hala is really all about how women function in supportive communities, how they amplify each other, how they hold each other up, and how they celebrate each and every one of our successes. So a little bit about me. I am a OBGYN. I have kind of a patchwork work life. I work clinically at the hospital, nights and weekends. I work during the day as the medical director for Maven Clinic, which is a Portfolia company. And then I advise some startups as well. I also have my own company called Equity Quotient with Dr. Esther Chu. And we just wrapped up a report today. We're really excited to deliver to a client. We do gender and race equity analytics for healthcare organizations. And so we did a deep dive into an organization, and I hope that they are really, I won't say excited, because not all of the news is good, right? When you're doing equity analytics, sometimes the news is tough to hear. But it's necessary if we want to create the organizational culture that we all want to work in, right? So that's a little bit about my background. I'm excited to work with Portfolia, mostly because I actually think that women, and especially women of color, LGBTQ women, I think there are so many voices in venture capital and in entrepreneurship that we haven't heard from. And I actually have seen it with my own eyes. Here in Los Angeles. My first introduction to a female entrepreneur in medicine, other than Dr. Sabri, was Renee Dua, who founded Heal, which is a company that comes to your house with the doctor, house calls. And then Lindsay Harper, who's a colleague of mine, an OBGYN, she started a company called Rosie that provides telehealth to women who suffer from low libido. Rebecca Dunsmore-Sue, who's the Chief Medical Officer for Genève, another Portfolia company. Lene Brayboy, who's over at Clue. She's an OBGYN. And I just actually met Carmen Peretta. She's a nephrologist at Cricket Health. So I am absolutely seeing how women are changing healthcare in just absolutely amazing ways. And I will say one of the most important ways is they bring an equity lens to how they approach digital health or healthcare in general. And I am so excited about that. So without any further ado, let me introduce Dr. Hala Sabri.
Hi, thank you so much for even having me here. And Jane, I'm always super impressed with everything that you're part of. A part that Jane did not say is actually how we met was not through my group. I actually was starting to deliver a baby in the ER and gladly handed over the patient with the crowning baby to Jane, who we used to work at the same hospital years ago. But yeah, so that was always a treat. But yes, I am Dr. Hala Sabri. I'm a board certified emergency medicine physician who's always had like a deep passion for business. I worked for the Disney company for a number of years, and I had this idea that I would work for hospitals. I would do hospital management. But then I got into medicine and realized how much sexism there was, and that would be the ultimate barrier for me getting into hospital management. And so I thought maybe I'll just take a break off of that and have some kids. I struggled with infertility for a couple of years, and through that, my kids stressed me out so much that I had to form a mom group to help this out. So I started off with 20 people. And like Jane said, she joined when it was about 1,400. That was probably a week in. And now we're about to celebrate our 6th anniversary next week. And we're at about 115,000 people. So for those that are doing quick math, that is not only quick growth, but there is less than 300,000 women physicians in the United States, and 96% of our group is in the United States, and then we spread across 109 countries. So we're international. But I will say, that break that I took was the perfect thing I could have taken in my life as far as going into hospital management. Because I learned how to be a community organizer. And that's something that was never on my bingo card for life at all. I just kind of fell into it and basically learned how to community manage really large groups of people, especially digitally, which was, had its own barriers. Jane actually was helping me for many years as a moderator on my board. And we have been through a lot, as the country has been through a lot of the United States. And so you can only imagine, having a lot of A-type personalities discussing these really hot topics and trying to moderate and have people see, kind of each other's side. But I will say that through that process of involvement of my community, I really learned a specific skill that I don't think medicine could have taught me, but it's really engagement and how to get healthcare workers to engage with products, learning their engagement patterns and their behaviors. And soon after, I started getting approached by companies that were tech companies that, their end user were healthcare workers or patients. And they really wanted to learn what I had learned over the last couple of years. They kind of wanted, some intel. And I remember one conversation reaching out to Jane and saying like, hey, like, do you ever consult with companies? And she's like, oh yes, I've been doing this secretly for a couple of years. And so I probably asked her way too many questions. It was really late at night, but I'm so happy that we had that conversation. And, she just rattled off a list of probably 10 women of probably 100 or more that she knows that are doing amazing things in the entrepreneurial space. But I kind of feel like just like my group kind of blew up talking about healthcare and children and balancing those two identities, because we were already having those conversations secretly. I feel like this is like the next generation of those conversations that now we've kind of evolved into entrepreneurs. But I think that those conversations are still having been done in, kind of behind the scenes. And I don't know exactly why, but I think that Jane's company, EQ, is going to figure that out one of these days. But I'm just happy to be along for the ride. But I did start my own business consulting companies, technology companies, basically on engagement practices. I proclaim myself as an engagement specialist. So that's really neat, especially in this day and age of misinformation and disinformation, and trying to put out some good value into the world. I also try to do exactly what Jane's doing on a more personal level of consulting with physician women, well, women in male dominated fields. It's not just physician women, but lawyers, dentists, and politicians, to kind of help with their mindset and help their growth, to gain the equity and kind of build an army of women who are going to smash the patriarchy together. And I'm partnering with Jane on that. So it's been fun. So yeah, and I'm excited. Lisa's a new friend to me this week, but we've become fast friends, and I'm excited for her to introduce herself to the group as well.
Thanks, Hala, and I'm so excited to be here. Hi, everyone. Lisa Shaw. I'm an internist and pediatrician by training, and my story is not so long with Jane or Hala, but it's awesome, and it just goes to show how just the smallest lucky thing where you can be connected to an amazing woman can help open up all of these networking opportunities and new women in your life. About 3 months ago, Esther Chu, who I know through Women of Impact, I called her up, and I had been sort of stalking Jane on LinkedIn, and said, Esther, I really need to talk to this person. I just need you to introduce me. And Jane, not knowing who I was and as busy as she is, gave me a full hour and really just helped me think through what I was going to do. I was at a crossroads in my career, and I was trying to figure out what was next. And she was completely there for me and didn't even know me at all. I was so thankful. And then, now I'm here. And I've met Hala, and I've met Trish, and all of these wonderful women. And to me, that's the best part about the opportunity of being a woman in healthcare right now. So my journey is a little convoluted, aren't all of ours, but internist and pediatrician, and thought I was going to just go down that traditional healthcare path, and had an amazing female mentor in residency who said to me one day, you're not really loving clinical practice all the time. There's got to be something. What drives you? And before I knew it, I moved out to the East Coast and started working in startup companies in healthcare, several different ones, where I was really trying to manage chronic disease, figure out how we could improve the quality and cost conundrum, and fix access. And about 6 years into my journey, I was in a company that was great, had a lot of men at the leadership table. And one day I looked around when my other female colleague left, and I noticed I was the only woman in the room. And I had never really noticed that. And you'd think as a resident, in the hospital, I totally would have. But it was really eye-opening, because at that moment, what I noticed is that things I would say would get repeated as if it was not my idea. I didn't just say it. Or, I'd get maybe interrupted in a meeting, or I would never sit at the table. I'd kind of sit in the periphery. And it was the first time I realized that I needed to really own my leadership at the table, and that I had one and I had a seat. And I was introduced at that time to Women of Impact. And it's a group of amazing women, women of impact in healthcare, who came together to really try and change healthcare for women. That was really the hope, and at the clinical level. But what they realized is they were all doing that themselves in their own roles as healthcare leaders across the country. But what we really needed to do was get more women into leadership positions and shatter glass ceilings. And so that's how I really started opening my mind to how can I balance and manage this professional side of my life with my personal desires to continue to help women grow and to have mentors to help me. And it's so true that we do have to boost each other. And I've spent the last 5 years of my career really trying to do that, both by surrounding myself by strong women and men who support women, which are equally as important and have been great mentors of mine as well, but also working in healthcare to really fix some of the inequities that I think are happening around how the healthcare system was built, really not around women, how access to care for us is an afterthought when we're balancing children, making 80% of healthcare decisions, bringing in 52% of the wealth in this country, doing things that really are often not noticed. And at the end of the day, not only are we making those decisions, but our health is falling to the wayside. And so that's really been my passion, is how do we continue to manage chronic disease and access, but really with a lens towards groups like women that is very unique and very different, and is not really how healthcare healthcare has been thought of in the innovation world. So super excited to be here. I'm currently working at a company called Twin Health, and we use artificial intelligence and precision medicine to manage chronic diseases. And I'm interested to tell you more about where I think that's going. But thanks for having me. And Jane and Hala, excited to be with both of you.
Thanks, Lisa. I want to flip it back to you right away. I want to ask you, tell us a little bit about what's wrong with the way that chronic disease management is managed for women and women's health, and what is your vision for the way in which artificial intelligence might improve that?
Sure. No, thanks. I realized in the last couple of years that we as women, our journey in healthcare is really complicated because we can't just go get primary care. We also need an OBGYN, right? And so at some point in our life, we start to transition from our pediatrician into women's health. And it's become really about, our ovaries and our uterus and our hormones. And we start to see an OBGYN. But the reality is there are other things. We have other organs that over time are also aging and are also being impacted by our environment and the foods we eat and the exercise we get and lots of other things, our stress levels. And so how is it that for us, the only way we can really take care of everything is we have to see two different physicians? And that's really challenging, particularly when, we are raising children sometimes, or we're taking care of our aging parents, or we're trying to get our careers established and making decisions for all the other people we love. And so I think what ends up happening, if you look at the journey, is once women hit about 50, they fall out. And instead of saying, well, I'm going to reestablish my care and now go see an internist, until the Welcome to Medicare 65 visit, we kind of fall off the radar and, we become sort of the urgent care, maybe see our OBGYN until we're 65. But, it's really a missed opportunity. So my belief is that 50 to 65 range, and probably even starting at 40 all the way to 80, there's this great need to be starting around prevention for women. And preventative medicine for women looks a little different. I mean, we all know about the metabolic syndrome of hypertension, dyslipidemia, obesity, diabetes. And in women in particular, heart disease is experienced differently. And we know that our bodies are very different in how we manage things like coronary artery disease and how we stay fit, how our metabolism with age goes down. And so for us, it's not enough to just watch our diet. We also need exercise. The data shows that women, in order to burn the amount of calories and to have, work with their declining metabolism, just given our size comparative to our male counterparts, we need to be doing exercise an hour a day, plus minimizing our calorie intake. So it's things like this that no one is telling us about. And then on top of it, no one's making it easy. I mean, so precision medicine, and AI, if we could figure out that, Jane, what foods does Jane really enjoy, first of all? And, they don't all have to be bad for Jane. There's probably a lot of foods out there you really love. We can see how your metabolism works. We can see how much sleep you're getting. We can see how certain exercises that you do, different things, whether it's spinning or it's walking with your dog, what that all does to your profile. And we can create your profile and then use that to give you very precise information about how you're going to get healthier. That's what we need for women. And those are the kinds of things that I think are the future of improving health for women. So.
Oh my God. I was actually on the Peloton today having that exact thought. Like, when is there going to be a technology someday that tells me exactly how many calories I need per day? And to your point, which nutrients, and yes, at 52, I am feeling that equation of decreased metabolism and an hour a day of exercise, like as the floor.
Exactly. And keto is not for everyone, right? The answer is not always keto. I have to say, I like my carbs. So there are good carbs we can eat and balance. So yeah, I love it. I'm with you.
Hala, I'm just curious. What do you think are some of the unique qualities and challenges of women-led companies or women-led communities, and what kind of impact are you going to have in terms of connecting or advising or consulting?
Yeah, so it's so interesting. I think women, as far as communities go, I think women are like the ultimate networkers. I mean, we sit there and complain, oh, men make decisions on the golf course or at the bar, but like we're making decisions everywhere. And oftentimes, like we're the ones that are making the final decisions in the household. And that's why a lot of marketing companies know that women have buying power. And so one of the things that I've learned, through PMG is, a lot of companies have reached out to try to advertise in our group. And at first I was like, oh, okay, like that's kind of flattering. But then realizing having a group of 100,000 plus, six-figure earners is really attractive,
Yeah.
But so I think the networking ability, I think that we shouldn't downplay that. I think that we have the ability to network. Now, I think where the mind shift comes in is one, not being scared to come out, like, just as I did. At first I was scared to even say that I was having some difficulty figuring out how to be a doctor and a mom, right? And then that leveled up and I was like, my brain was growing and it was growing beyond medicine, just like Lisa had mentioned and Jane I've seen, and so then it was like, well, I really want to be an entrepreneur, but like I don't have like a mentor for that. Well, do you need a mentor? I don't know, not necessarily, but it was really nice to network with you, Jane, and, to even just become fast friends with Lisa and to know that we can network together and figure out, like, even though the three of us have very different interests, like we know people, it's like that 6 degrees of separation. So I think in the network ability, I think that we are, really quick to, I want to say kind of superior in that way if we use it to our advantage as our superpower. But I will say that, the women's experience, it just helps with decision making of bringing diversity to the table. And I'm not saying that it's superior to men or that men are not needed, but I think that there's certain experiences that we have that we are going to have that bias towards women and kind of thinking about women when we're developing products and ideas that just makes every company more rich and add more value. One of the companies that I work for now is named Doctorpedia, and it's a company that is trying to bring the antidote to the social media space of providing vetted medical material to patients in ways and visual and written ways that patients can understand and that are direct and to the point, not so vague where you look at a rash and everything ends in cancer, like, or death, because we're covering our butts here when we're writing medical information, but really bringing more audiovisual and material for patients to understand so they can be more engaged and take ownership of their health. And so on the first week of the job, I come in and, they're showing me their mission statement and I kind of had asked some questions and they had been working on this company for 5 years. And they were like, we never thought about this stuff. And so within a week, I changed the mission statement and I didn't even know. It was just because I came in. I'd like to say I'm so brilliant, but I think it's just a women's mindset of just coming in with a new, fresh pair of eyes. And I'm the only executive in that startup right now that's a woman.
Yeah.
And I'm very thankful that, being able to use my voice and my experience, I'm able to use my networking and bring more women into there. And I'm just so thankful that that company is just one example of companies that, do want more women in the decision-making spaces. So I think that women, they just have different experiences. And I think it's about time that we bring them to the table.
That brings up another question, and it's not a pre-planned one, so I apologize. I'm gonna toss this out to you, but I'm curious, in your experience, curating this network of 115,000 women physicians, right? So really smart women who graduated at the top of their classes and have all the accolades. How has it been? Have you seen a change over the course of 6 years in terms of how women talk about investing and money? Because in order to be an entrepreneur, you can't ignore the fact that sometimes you have to go get money, sometimes you have to find investors, sometimes you have to talk about finances. And what I'm seeing sometimes are conversations where women are expressing a little bit of an imposter syndrome when it comes to conversations about money. And I'm just curious, have you seen an evolution over the 6 years in terms of women getting more comfortable talking about finances and more comfortable with the idea of being lead investors in their own lives?
No, I love that question, even though it's off the cuff. I think it's perfect. I do see that, and I don't even really call it imposter syndrome in money. I think it's more of money scarcity. And I think as women, most of us, we talk about shattering the glass ceiling. I think those ceilings have been shattered a long time ago. We're just seeing how far we can go now. And if you don't believe me, look at your mom or look at your grandma and see where you are today. So if you are further than where they were in whatever, kind of category that you're thinking about, then you've shattered the glass ceiling. And so congratulations to you. Give yourself a pat on the back. Use that as a confidence booster for your next step. Now, I will say that there are a lot of hesitancy, not only in women, but in physicians in general, of investing, because I think that we go through this 10-year or 12-year cycle of being really poor. I mean, we're students and then we're residents and then we're paying off debt, and some of us are still paying off debt until we retire. So I think it's a little bit of money scarcity, but then asking questions when women start to get curious, then they don't really know where to ask or who to ask. And especially because we have already mastered the art of medicine. So a lot of people seem to think that we should master everything in our life. Like, what? You don't know what an annuity is? Like, well, no, I don't. They didn't teach that in medical school. They should, but they didn't. So I think what's happening now is as I started becoming more curious and more confident in my leadership skills, I started sharing that part of my life. And when I started sharing that part of my life, I mean, it was not received well, Jane. You remember that was not just a couple of months ago. I was talking about how I was delving investment of real estate, and some of the women freaked out. They were like, what are you doing? Like, this is ruining the group. And I'm like, no, you guys, like, there is a wealth gap in this country. Like, how do you think that we're going to meet that? Like, we need to start, evolving our thought for those that do want to invest. So I think, but ever since then, even though it was like a really hard week or whatever it was, that time period when I shared my story about getting into investing, now people are kind of coming out the woodworks. And I just had one last night messaging me asking if I have some kind of apprenticeship set up, and I don't. But
like the Hollow School of Entrepreneurship?
Well, specifically to real estate, but but I do not, and I don't think I'm well versed in the area to be teaching real estate investment. But I will say that what I loved about that conversation with her last night is that she saw me as a possibility of what can be.
Yes, exactly.
And then when someone sees that you could be that, then they have an idea. They have someone that they've imagined a destination to go to, and then they'll start working towards it. And I think that that's where the evolution is. And I think that we know now I'm just, every time I mention some of the things I'm doing, I know I'm going to get backlash because it's change. It's a change of mindset and people don't want to be challenged. But, I know it's for the betterment of our success in our future and our legacy that we're going to be leaving, our future generations of women.
Yeah. No, it's funny that you mentioned that because I became a doctor actually because I was a patient, and the OBGYN resident who took care of me, I decided that night in the ER that I wanted to be her. I obviously knew I wasn't going to be her, but there was so much about how she treated me and how her mind worked. And now, granted, my dad was a doctor, so it wasn't too far of a stretch genetically. But yeah, sometimes you need that focus, that person that becomes your North Star, and you don't. It's not mimicking or emulating, but it's imagining that you could become that, and more. So speaking of more, Lisa, let's talk a little bit. I want to hear more about how you think precision medicine or AI, are we talking about the ability to potentially extend the lives of women, or what are some of the other potential health benefits you see with applying technology to healthcare conundrums or problems?
Yeah. Well, so, it's funny. I always say that what's impressed me the most about the femtech space today is that there's a quick realization that, yes, technology is critical, but you can't really completely take away the in-person touch, right? And so there is a place still for brick and mortar medicine. And so when I talk about technology, I don't want to say that it can ever replace anything, but I think 80% of what we do in healthcare can be automated, can be technology, can be 24/7, where you are and when you are, what you're doing, doing, what you're eating. So, imagine a world where if you're willing to do it for 30 days, we're collecting a lot of data on you, right? And we're getting blood data, whether it be your blood sugars, or we're getting your lipids, or we're able to get from you your daily BMI. And we're also looking at all the foods you eat. And we can use machine learning to sort of start to predict, what are you, Jane, what are you, Hala, going to be doing? What is happening to your body when you have 3 hours of sleep? What's happening to your body when you drink 3 glasses of red wine, or you eat this food, or how does it shape, what is it doing to you? And we start to share that information back with you. And I think what we forget is that women really like information. They want information. Everyone says that, women they go with their gut and they go with their heart, maybe, but we're also data curators. Like, we want to know data, and we understand data, and don't underestimate how well we do. We use it when we shop, we use it in every consumer decision we make, and we certainly want to use it in our healthcare and the healthcare for others. So, I think the future really holds being able to give you in the palm of your hand data on what your body is doing. The sensors, the Fitbits, the blood pressure cuffs, the being able to take all of that information in. And I think it's really important also to curate all that with your history, like your medical history. So we know if you have premature, menopause, you're at a higher risk for heart disease. So I know that. And then I also see on top of what your blood pressure is like, or your BMI, I, as a physician, can manage you and put a team around you a little better to be looking for heart disease in you as a woman. And I think, unfortunately, we just aren't built to prevent. And that's what we really need to be doing to make women live longer. I mean, that is the answer. It's prevention. And if women knew how to do it, they would do a better job of it than their male counterparts. I would say that. I'd be the first to say that, because it's the way we take care of everything in our lives. We do it with our heart and soul, but we also do it, with our brains and our IQs. And so, I really think precision medicine is going to offer that. The other thing I'd say that I think people have taken, are starting to pay attention to, but has been missing, is the impact of mental health here. And so when we talk about precision medicine and AI, a lot of times we talk about data in terms of clinical data, right? So medical data, it might be your weight, it might be your blood pressure, your heart rate, but now add in there, what's your mood today? How's your stress level? And start taking those pieces in and building algorithms that are really able to predict how those two things interplay. And, we know when your mood and your happiness level is higher, you're also going to take better care of yourself. And so I think all of these things are what the future of healthcare for women really needs. And I've been anxious to see more AI and precision medicine for women. Yeah. It's coming out, but it's not focusing on how we're different. It reminds me of the early day research, and even today's research, even COVID research. It's all about men, and a lot of it's being done by men about men. And when they think of women, they're thinking of their end of who's in their house. They're not thinking about us as a population. Well, my wife didn't have that, so it's not an issue. So, I think that's really, I really think that's the future. And I hope we can see more funding and more investors focus on how we can use those technologies to help women specifically.
Can you just say real briefly, it came to my mind, if someone's listening or watching this and they're thinking, how do I know, Dr. Shah, who to give my data to, right? I mean, do I give my health data to Apple, because there's opportunities on my phone to enter in all sorts of pieces of data about my health. How should a consumer vet a company that they're going to give health data to?
Oh, that's a tough question,
oh,
right?
Sorry.
No, it's a great question. I think that's really hard, actually. And right now, it depends on the type of data, right? So I think, your steps and what I see in Apple, most of that's reasonable. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't even fill out all the stuff in the health app. I think the question is, what's the clinical team whose hands it's falling in A? So is there a clinical team? Are there people who understand clinical medicine on the receiving end? Because that's hugely important. And, obviously we don't know how to vet HIPAA or privacy or, what's happening with their data. But we do know that if the organization that's receiving your data isn't grounded in healthcare professionals, people who, whether it's physicians or nursing or clinical staff or researchers who are, clinically trained or research trained on the clinical side. I think that's a really important piece of it, because I do think it's really hard for us to vet technology and privacy as individual consumers who aren't building the tech ourselves or developing it ourselves. So that would be my first thing, is really finding out the people who work with that organization or where that data is going. What's the clinical enterprise that's looking at it and using it? And then obviously all of these companies have privacy policies and data use agreements, and you have to read them. And I know that's like completely overwhelming, but you have to, or ask someone to look at them, or, if you're really thinking about giving personal data, then you probably should have an attorney and think about that, or have someone look at it and make sure it's not risky, because where that data gets shared and how loosely it gets shared is really the question, and how it's de-identified or not. So I don't have a perfect answer, but I do think organizations that are taking your data need to have some clinical advisory board or some medical group or something that's representing the clinical side of this. And that gives them more credibility for sure.
Yeah. Well, there's a company idea right there. You could start a company that vets the privacy policies and procedures and certifies a company as having good security, good HIPAA, and not playing with your data in a way that you didn't intend to have them use your data when you signed up.
Brilliant, Jane.
I know, right? Hala, we are almost out of time. Tell me one way that you think you and your enterprises are going to tackle gender equity in the next 5 years.
Yeah, no pressure. Let me just fix that for you, for our generation. Honestly, I think, I think just for all of us to be a little bit more open, all of us women who are doing amazing things. And I know it's not just us three that are on this panel, but I know personally a lot of people who are watching this on this webinar right now that have done amazing things. And what's interesting about women is that sometimes they don't raise their hand to share their information because they think like, well, I didn't do that much. But you know what? Like, and I was one of those women, not just like 2 years ago. And I was like, what do you mean? I made the largest community of women physicians that exist in the world. And I still had this mindset that I didn't do enough, So for me, I'm really focused since I've had that evolution of mindset. And I think that for entrepreneurs, the best investment is in your mindset. 40% of all executives in that self-reported that they have a coach. You wouldn't go to the Olympics without a coach. Why would you go and be an entrepreneur without a coach? And so a lot of people do have business coaches. I, myself have hired coaches. I became a coach myself, really to help coach other people that are, like me, women in male dominated fields. Because if we really want to talk about equity, I love what Jane and Esther are doing. They're highlighting and they have diagnostics to show where that gap is and to have suggestions of how to fill that gap. But I think on the back end as well, I think providing these women with the same resources that these men have, coaching and mindset work, to get them to even to step up and to change their mindset. And I'm talking about someone who just started doing that 2 or 3 years ago. So it's not like I just came to this place now where I'm like, oh, I'm going to develop a business. I'm going to be this engagement specialist. And now I work for Fortune 500 companies, helping, them curate new products and services that are going to create impact in the world. I didn't just get there. I really had to coach myself through it and a lot out of those limiting beliefs and that self-hate, kind of talk. So that's what I'm doing.
I love that. I love that. Lisa, a parting thought. How can we make medicine better and more equitable?
I mean, oh gosh, every single which way. So starting with the clinical side, we have to start doing more research for women. We have to start representing us better in these studies. I mean, we have to have the research team be more female. We have to have the companies that are investing in it have boards that are female. We have to have investor communities be understanding women. When you walk into a room and you're pitching an idea about a startup and you're a young female, passionate entrepreneur who's trying to fix a problem you experienced in your early 20s and you want to go and make it better or fix a problem your mother experienced, the group of investors has to know what you're talking about, and it can't be an N of one for them. It has to be an N of millions. And I think we need to start there. And then the last thing I'll say is all of us need to mentor each other and be willing to be mentored and take the feedback and grow with it and fail forward and just feel great every day about what you've accomplished, because every single person on this call, we're the ones who are going to change it for women. And I'm really proud. I tell my daughter all the time, so proud to be a female, would never trade it for anything in the world. So
I love it.
Anyway, that's my thought.
And don't think you're done yet. Now we're just moving to the Q&A. So many questions coming in, and Jane, I'm here to help you with some of those questions, but you can take a look at these as well. And there's so many, which ones you might have the greatest interest in. I know a couple of them, a number of people are talking about kind of the holistic aspect of, integrating in food and nutrition and what food is doing to our body, especially here in the Western world. Is there more that you'd like to talk about around that, Lisa or Hala?
I'll just say that I think on the food front, the fad diet concept is finally starting to go away. And I think people are finally starting to recognize that it's not a one fix thing, that cut out all your carbohydrates and eat bacon and steak for, months at a time and get ketotic and you'll feel better. Or, we see Noom, and I think it's really incredible what's happening with that. I think that you really have to start figuring out balance and figuring out, I think where we have to get better in healthcare is figuring out how Hala responds to a food versus Jane, because it's not the same. And to think that we all respond the same way to the things we put in our bodies is like saying that none of, allergies wouldn't exist if that was true. Some of us wouldn't have problems with pollen or dogs or what have you. And it's no different with food. So I think we have to start learning about trying to understand better. And I don't think we can do that alone. The trial and error is too tough because food is made up of so many different complex macro and micronutrients. So companies that are doing that, I think, are going to be amazing. I don't know, Hala, anything on your thoughts on the food front?
Yeah, I think that, gut health has been a topic, for as long as I can remember. And depending on who has like the best advertisement, that's what we're going with now, So I think it's been really confusing for women. There's a woman that's in that space that I really admire and I follow. Her name is Dr. Robin Chutkin, and she talks a lot about this. I worked on a TV show with her briefly last year. And so it was really neat to see kind of her space and, kind of really taking it to another level of figuring out like, how do women, and not only women, but it's like, the younger ages versus the older ages, and how do they process food? And right now, a lot of the studies that are on food that we were basing our diets off of were, from, 50 years ago. We process food differently now. We grow food differently now. They were a lot more organic back then. And so, what are we doing now? And I think also like addressing the times of, kind of, being a mom, that's a certain time of your life. That's a certain gap of your life. And, for those of you that are moms, that your nutrition comes last after your kids. Like, you care so much about what's going in your kid's mouth, and you're sitting there eating scraps as you're putting away the dishes because you didn't get time to eat. And so every mom is probably laughing because you've done that, and I call it mofo scarcity, because like we have money scarcity and food scarcity, like this idea of like, I don't know when I'm going to eat next, and I don't want to invest in really good food. And so like you're here putting really bad things in your body that you've identified as not bad because, McDonald's is bad or fast food is bad, but not realizing the stuff in your pantry is probably not good for you either. But also meeting that gap that the stuff that does, that is the best for your body, sometimes people just can't afford, and so we have, when we have, a lot of poverty, and even women who are in very, submissive relationships, like 30% of women are in intimate partner violence relationships where they may not even have those choices of, of any type of independence in their life. So this goes really deep. So it's not just as easy as what should we be eating and not eating to prevent diseases. It's more of like, well, how can we get equitable food for everybody, and start there.
It's super, super structural. I'm so glad you said that, Hala. And I also want to add that, I think, and I don't know if this is uniquely American, I feel bad that I don't know if it is, but I do see a way in which sometimes supplements are often marketed to women. So instead of actually encouraging whole foods or raw vegetables or vegetables and fruits. And to your point, Hala, sometimes those things are really expensive, right? But we also have a tendency, I feel like sometimes, to think that we can cover up bad eating with a supplement. And I always encourage my patients to go and, if you want to get the vitamins and you want to get the minerals, your body actually absorbs and responds to them better when they are in the form of a food as opposed to a supplement. But I do think women are oftentimes sold supplements with marketing strategies that sometimes feel a little bit uh, what is the word I'm looking for?
Manipulative.
Yeah, coercive. Yeah, a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, Trish, back to you.
Yes. No, a couple of questions about, older women, menopausal. And I know I saw recently in Frost and Sullivan that they see menopause as one of the really major areas for innovation in women's health. What are you seeing there?
Well, I have to say, I think that is a wide open space, and it's ready to be filled with lots of women-led companies solving problems in postmenopausal health. I'm really excited. My friend Dr. Jennifer Gunter is coming out with a menopause book in April, I think. And for those of you that don't know, Jennifer talks about every subject with zero taboos. Every subject is on the table. There are no subjects that are off the table. And so I think that that's exactly where we need to go in terms of solving some of the problems for postmenopausal women's health, is to talk about everything. And to think about the ways that companies or devices or products or people can really help to not only extend women's postmenopausal lives, but improve the quality too. As an OBGYN, obviously, I see the damage that babies do to their mothers when they are born. And I know that this 30-year-old is not going to really maybe experience the effects of the damage to her pelvic floor, to her bladder, until 35, 40, 45 years down the road. But is surgery the only answer for the pelvic floor? I don't think that is the case. I think there are other remedies to help with the ways in which the body sort of falls down as we age. But I'm really excited to have more conversations about postmenopausal health, because I think that as women age, they deserve to age well and with great quality.
And just a quick shout out here. Dr. Brittany Barreto is on, and if you all have not had an opportunity to listen to her podcast, Femtech Focus podcast, that's one you're definitely going to want to listen to. She just interviews great companies and has some wonderful thought leaders on as well. And she's just pointing out that Fortune just said they see menopause as a $600 billion market. So we're really looking for the answers there. Oh, lots of people dropping in.
With that podcast, yeah.
Yeah, so super. A lot of great podcasts and things happening there. You talk about childbirth. That's another area. And of course, especially with women of color having so many bad outcomes with childbirth. What do you see with pregnancy and childbirth?
Well, I'll be honest. I mean, when I think of pregnancy and childbirth, I think of the fact that, for one, we don't have universal health care. So the manner by which women receive health care in this country is very inequitable, right? So as medical director at Maven, we are constantly looking for ways to fill the gaps that happen in maternity and postpartum care. But for me, I feel like when we're looking at pregnancy and postpartum, oftentimes it's a resource issue, in the sense that women don't have access to the specialists that they need. Their mental health is oftentimes not even asked about, ignored. Women unfortunately give birth and then the focus is on the baby. However, 30% of preeclampsia and hypertensive disorders happen in the postpartum period. There's a lot of health happening in the postpartum period, but that actually gets ignored because the family and even the mother herself, her focus is on her baby. And it's almost like she needs a doula to focus on her, right? Because her body's recovering from pregnancy. What are all the needs that she has, including mental health support? So, but that's such a big conversation, and it has a lot to do with resources. And I wish we had universal health care.
Oh, yes. Okay, I'm telling you, you all are getting so many fangirls out here. So many great comments about this amazing panel and your backgrounds as entrepreneurs. I'm going to take about 3 minutes and tell our group about our Femtech venture fund that's open right now, and then turn it back to the panel so they can share their kind of parting pearls of wisdom with you. Because what a group, and I knew when we were listening to them earlier this week that, we could do a 3-hour symposium on this, and really want to have you all back. Portfolio has launched its second Femtech fund. It is now open to investors, and most of our investors, we take 249 in each fund. 95% of them are women like yourselves, and the minimum is $10,000. And our team of experts, and this includes Dr. Jane Van Dies in this fund, will invest in 10 companies. So about 8 to 12, but around an average of 10 entrepreneurial companies in the women's health space. We also have opened the Active Aging and Longevity Fund. There's a little bit of crossover on menopause there, but they don't only do healthcare, they'll also do financial services and new ways to live and social and travel as well. And that's the same kind of fund, again, minimum of $10,000. And one of the exciting things is every month you're able to come on and watch the company's pitch that we're considering and ask questions just like we're doing here. You can vote on it. Your vote doesn't make your decision on that investment. The professionals do, but you can even be on a diligence team and learn how we research companies to make that final decision. So we try to keep it as transparent and educational as possible. And then you can add value to those companies as well. And in our Femtech One panel, women, we had over right about 40% that were from the women's health or from the healthcare field. So from 40 states. So the ability to have that kind of really brain trust behind these companies is just amazing, and what makes us successful as investors. All of our funds are designed for women, backing those companies we want in the world. So, and I think they're probably dropping in. Yes, they've dropped in. Tomorrow, we're actually with lead partner Nola Masterson doing an overview of this fund, so you can ask questions. Back to you all now. I know there's a lot of questions too about, your advice on what do young entrepreneurs need to know when they're thinking about starting health tech companies. Maybe we have a little bit of time. I talked pretty quickly there. Why don't we answer that question, and then we'll do that pearls of kind of the last minute pearls of wisdom there.
Lisa, do you want to lead us off on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So that's always it's such a great question because there's so much tech happening with young women and men. But I love watching what young women are doing in the tech space. And I think there's a couple of things. One is being focused on what you want to be in the tech space, because it's a very crowded space. And I think, I read recently, like 1 out of some couple hundred tech companies make it through into like an actual offering that's out there in the marketplace, because there's so many startups in the tech space. So I think it's really important to know exactly what your vision is, what you're doing. Are you full stack? Are you, focused on a very specific part? Are you consumer facing? Are you provider facing? What is it that you really want to be? And what I think has been amazing about women who are young women who I've seen enter in the tech space, and I'm not not a developer or a tech innovator, but I've advised several different women companies on this space. And one of the things I think is fascinating is they really are thoughtful about the consumer and the end user, which is such a huge advantage. If you think back to the tech space in healthcare with the EMR industry, no one ever thought about the end user, which was the physician, right? I mean, I'm talking to physicians here, so I know Hala and Jay know what I'm talking about. And all of these other consulting companies built their entire, world and profit off of helping EMR companies make it useful to the doctor, which was like the craziest thing you would think. So to avoid that, I think really understanding the end user and what they need and being able to, be thoughtful about HIPAA, be thoughtful about privacy, but really make it something that is easy to use. And then the last thing I'd say is, don't underestimate the importance of integrating it into the healthcare delivery space. And I think we think, there will be some API that we can integrate it with, or it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, everyone wants their information to talk to each other. And where healthcare is broken is when we as providers aren't able to co-manage our woman in a way that is going to be holistic for her. And so I think we have to be really thoughtful about how we make sure that information makes its way, because at the end of the day, that is the most important part. And understanding the healthcare landscape, I think a lot of tech developers or tech companies don't really understand healthcare. It's a great space to develop a tech product in, but you have to understand who your customers are. Are you going to the payers? Are you going to the delivery side? Are you staying with the consumer and what we call the patient or the member? But I think, all of these things are really important to consider. So having a medical advisor or someone, like Jane, like Hala, to help you kind of guide through this, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm. Hala, advice for the young entrepreneur?
I think my advice is don't wait around for someone to hand you a position. I mean, I think, when I started getting curious about, working with tech, I was at dinner with my husband's an engineer, and I was at dinner with one of his friends. And at that time he was working for Apple, and this is years ago, this is a long, long time ago. And he was like, "Hey, can I pick your brain for a second?" Which really is key phrase for like, you should be charging for whatever it is that they're about to ask you. And I said, "Yeah, sure." We're at dinner, and he said, "Hey, what do you think an Apple Watch could do if we were able to take an EKG?" And this is years before they came out with the monitoring on the Apple Watch, and I really wish I would have charged him. But I think at that time I started thinking like, wait, I'm actually really smart. I actually know what I'm doing. I have expertise already. There's nothing that's going to make me more expert than what I am now, is just doing it. And so I think at that time I started kind of Googling, some tech companies that I was like, kind of really interested in. I'm like, oh, they don't have any physician, roles, and oh, woe is me, maybe next year, maybe next time. But realizing if I just emailed someone and said, "Hey, this is my expertise. This is where I come from. This is what I'm interested in." Just like what Lisa said, like, know what you want to do and just tell that company that's what you want to do. And I'm telling you, there is always room for you. Always, always, always. And even if there's not room for you right now, if you have that tenacity and if you have that innovative mindset that I can make a job for myself, if you already start with that, then you can make any product that you want to. You can be part of that team. And I think it goes a long way. So don't wait around for people. And I think that's why mindset is such a big deal, So make your own path and don't be scared, because you're not going to do it wrong.
Yeah. I will say one thing, but I also want to say I'm seeing questions in here that are amazing. And I will say for myself, that you can feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Hala, Lisa, can they reach out to you guys as well?
Of course.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Yeah. My parting words are just, the future is female. I think this panel has exemplified what happens when you bring innovative, smart, and by smart, I mean brilliant women to the table, who are constantly thinking about how to solve problems, with collaboration and a spirit of absolute community, and not competition, but really, really collaboration. And I just absolutely feel so blessed to be on this panel with such smart women. So that's my parting word.
Jane, absolutely fabulous panel. Lisa, Hala, thank you so much. You can see the energy of the members that are just so thrilled about the stories you've told, the wisdom you've imparted, and it's just really amazing. You're doing such great things for women and for women's health, and your examples for all of us to just step out and create things that no one's imagined before. So thank you all. And friends that are on here, it's time to invest. That's how we change women's health. The men aren't all of a sudden going to see the opportunities right there in front of them. It's our money together that's going to back these new innovations. So come on in, get to know us, and be a part of this great, emerging crew of women that are putting their money behind women's health. All right, well, thank you all. And oh my gosh, Hala, Lisa, thank you so much. We're gonna let you all go.
Thank you, Trish.
Thank you for having us. Thanks,
Thank
Trish.
you.
Thanks, Jane.
Uterus.
Bye, Hala. Talk soon.
Bye, Lisa. Bye, Jane.
Bye.
Bye. You're the best.